Welcome to another SAIEE technical talk hosted by the Nuclear Chapter. Today's discussion is going to be unpacking nuclear environmental management strategies, and we have three speakers today, and they will be presenting both the current status of actions in South Africa, the philosophical discussion of nuclear waste and its moral and ethical issues, and lastly, the geology. Very well qualified speakers they are indeed. Before I start, attendees are reminded to ensure the volume is turned up on their device. Ensure you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure the streaming and audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the questions panel located within the GoToWebinar control panel. By default, the control panel is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The chat functions reserved for webinar organizer and panelists to communicate with attendees. Attendees will not be able to chat with each other, however, are encouraged to ask questions. A recording of the presentation will be made available on the SAIEE YouTube channel, SAIEE TV. The recording will also be made available on the SAIEE website under the Events drop-down menu in the section Past Events and Webinars. This page is updated regularly, so ensure you check back as often as possible for new uploads and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more uploads. A certificate of attendance will be issued a few weeks after this webinar once you've received the CPD validation number for this webinar from EXA. We mentioned questions there. We've got three very interesting talks. My intention is to leave the questions to the end. So please raise questions as we go through, and we'll go through the questions when we get to the end. Okay, let's start with the obvious question. Who the heck am I? I'm Dave Nicholls. I'm the chairman of this chapter. I was with ESCOM from '84 until 18 months ago, and I retired at the end of 2018. But I was then made the chairman of the board of NEXA in January this year, and I've had a few international connections. So that's my background. But if I can move on now to the first speaker. The first speaker is Dr. Suzan Bvumbi, who is a senior physicist at the National Radioactive Waste Disposal Institute, NRWDI. She's one of the founding staff members of NRWDI. Her tasks include policies and practices for low and intermediate level waste, processing and disposal, spent fuel management, and related research. Suzan is an experimental nuclear physicist with special competence in nuclear structure, specializing in gamma ray spectroscopy. Pardon my English. She teaches and continues with nuclear research at the University of Johannesburg and NRF at Temba Labs, University of Witwatersrand. So with that, I will pass across to Suzan, who is going to talk to us about ESCOM, about the government's, the country's present processes. So it's across to you, Suzan.
Thank you, Dave, for a lovely presentation or introduction. All the time when we want to talk about nuclear, we always have to explain ourselves because of the legacy that has been left by the past nuclear accidents. Of course, nuclear has misperceptions regarding its safety, its cost, and of course, the quantity of radioactive waste that is produced during our nuclear activities. But with that being said, can we really afford to ignore the positive contributions and benefits that nuclear continues to bring to our people? Of course, we know that all things nuclear are not evil, because this is like lumping up nuclear medicine and nuclear weapons. The two things cannot go together. South Africa is proven to be very reliable when it comes to nuclear. We see this with the strategic key points of South Africa, which is Koeberg Power Nuclear Station, and also the Safari 1 research reactor, which is at NEXA in Pelindaba, and of course the low-level disposal facility, which is at Falputz. Over the years, South Africa has proven and has shown that it is very much capable and has the proper skills to head nuclear activities with safe, safety and precaution, making sure that the public and the environment are safe. Of course, these activities at Pelindaba, Safari 1 Research Reactor and the Quebec Power Station are relying heavily on nuclear reactions from fusion, scattering, various decays, and also fission, which is where the reaction that they are using at the power station. And we rely on these nuclear reactions because we know that they are ideal, they are constant, we can predict what is going to happen, and we're able to control whatever we're doing. And the activities that we embark on are very kind to the environment because there are no emissions that bring harm to the environment and also to the people. And of course, we know that nuclear is a safe, clean, and secure source of energy compared to the other facilities that produce energy. Of course, as much as these activities are nice and secure, whatever we do, we know that we produce radioactive waste. Besides the operation from the nuclear power station and also the Safari Research Reactor, there are other nuclear activities from the industry and of course from decommissioning of various nuclear installations. If you go reprocessing, nuclear activities in medicine and recycling, these activities at the end, they bring radioactive waste. And of course, you will name this radioactive waste because you are considering whatever you have produced to be not a resource that you can use. You want to dispose of it or you want to store it until it decays to levels that are not harmful. Now that you have this radioactive waste, you would want to classify them according to their activity, the type of radionuclides that is produced, and of course the half-life of the radionuclides produced in the radioactive waste. The classifications will vary from low-level waste, that is waste that do not produce heat. It means that you can dispose of them easily in near-surface disposal facilities. And of course, we can go on to intermediate, long-lived and short-lived radioactive waste that is contained in the waste. And those still do not produce heat. You can still dispose of them into low-level near-surface disposal facilities. And of course, the challenging one is the high-level waste, considering mostly spent nuclear fuel, which produces lots and lots amount of heat, which is why it is stored in wet pools for about a decade or so to make sure that the heat is lower down and the activity, of course, is a bit lower compared to when it was produced in the power reactor. When you have produced this waste, you have to make sure that you are safely handling the waste, you are safely storing the waste, and you are safely transporting the waste. And of course, when you go to final disposal, you have to do it properly. And here I show a few pictures of some of the activities that happen regularly at the Falpus Disposal Waste Facility in the Northern Cape. And all of this, we ensure that we do this to make sure that the public and the environment are not exposed to the radiations that are emitted from the radioactive waste. And of course, this type of radioactive waste, there are various methods, or you can say strategies, that you can use to deal with the waste that is produced in the various activities. The one that South Africa is employing is the near surface method, which you can just dip few meters depending on the type of waste that you want to dispose of. And of course, for high level waste, radioactive waste that contain lots and lots of heat, and the radionuclides that are inside are very long lived. You want to go deeper to make sure that you are not at the surface of the environment. Some employ the borehole disposal method. Some will go the reprocessing route. After reprocessing, they will do transmutation of the high-level waste to make sure that they reduce the volume and also the duration. And of course, some will opt for long-term wet or dry storage, depending on the strategy that you will choose as a country. And of course, if you go to geological repositories, you can decide to go for open and make sure that you will be able to retrieve the waste, or you can seal it completely. But as much as we're doing all this, as much as we make sure that what we're doing is safe, can we confidently commit societal resources to manage this waste for the future? Because we don't want to dispose of the waste and burden the future generation and find out that they are not able to manage the waste that we have buried. And can we also scientifically minimize the chances of radionuclide migration, because we don't want to find the waste leaking to the groundwater that will be consumed by the animals and also the people. And of course, anything nuclear, as I've said, we always have to explain ourselves. Can we ensure social and political support for such kind of projects? Because if we're choosing a site, we have to make sure that the public that reside next to the site are okay and comfortable with the project that we want to bring. And of course, there's always political will for whatever we want to do. So here I'm showing you the low-level waste near surface disposal facility at Falkputz. Falkputz is in the Northern Cape, about 100 kilometers from Springbok. You can see here the disposal of low-level waste in tin containers. And you can see that the facility is not anything attractive. It looks very dry. So of course, facilities like this, you want to make them unattractive to people who might think of mining or pursuing agricultural activities. And there's a bit of wildlife at the site. And of course, you can see here the public, because if you are doing nuclear, you regularly have to communicate with the public and also the people who reside near to the facility, to ensure and to reassure them that whatever we're doing is still safe and secure and they have nothing to worry about. As I've said initially, I said that the high-level waste, in particular spent fuel, is the one that is more challenging compared to the other type of waste. So here I'm showing you the nuclear fuel cycle from the front end to the back end. So you can have a closed or an open cycle. That is after you have decided whether your spent fuel is a waste or a resource. But we know that spent nuclear fuel is a resource which carries a lot of residual energy. And with technology evolving, we hope that in future we will be able to harvest the energy that is contained in the spent fuel. So here from the front end, you are seeing from the uranium ore to the fabrication to enrichment, because we know that the one that we have mined is not having the correct concentration or the correct mass of uranium that is needed in the reactor until you take it to the core. So if you go the closed cycle, it means that from the core, you are taking it back, you reprocess it, you extract your uranium and the plutonium and go back to the fabrication of your MOX fuel, back to the reactor, and then you do the process again and again. But if you go to an open cycle, it means that from the origin, you go all the way. After the reactor, you take it out, you put it into the reactor pools for cooling for about a decade. And then if you have other plans, you can take it out from the wet storage to a dry storage if you wish. From there, you can go to deep geological disposal. So spent fuel management involves on-site storage that can be in wet storage or in dry storage, or you can take it off-site completely in a consolidated storage, still on wet or dry, or you can reprocess the fuel, or you can dispose of it into a deep geological repository because it contains heat and has long-lived radioactive nuclides. And of course, there's transportation when you are dealing with spent fuel management. You can use transportation casks to transport your fuel. And then, of course, you have what some are calling it wait and see. So there are countries which are just sitting with their fuel and they don't know their final solution for the fuel. They're just sitting and they're waiting to see what will happen. And because spent fuel contains very long-lived radionuclides, it becomes a big challenge socially and politically. Which community is going to allow you to come and have a deep geological repository and you bury something that is going to sit there for thousands and thousands of years? It is going to be very challenging. And of course, there's supposed to be political will, because when it comes to spent fuel, it does not depend on us who are doing the work, but the government or the politics is the one that takes the final decision of what they want to do with the fuel. So that boils down to policies and regulations. So as much as spent fuel contains very long-lived radioactive nuclides, there is a big help with high-level waste transmutation after processing. If you look at this very attractive graph of relative radio toxicity versus the time in years, you can see that if you don't reprocess your spent fuel and you decide to bury it into a deep geological repository, it is going to take you thousands and thousands and thousands of years for it to decay back to natural uranium. But if you reprocess it and separate plutonium and uranium, and then you do transmutation of minor actinides that are contained within the fuel, you can see that the duration is reduced by 1,000 times, and the volume is also reduced by 100 times. So we're being kind to the environment, we're being kind to the people. So the saying that goes by saying, it is not science if it does not bring hope to humanity. High-level waste transmutation takes care of that. So South Africa has chosen their own strategy currently. You can see here, I'm showing about 5 scenarios. As we are now, South Africa, I would say, has chosen scenario 5 because they are saying from the reactor, it must go to a central interim storage facility, which is dry. But after that, we don't know what they are going to do. But you can see the other strategies are saying take your fuel abroad. But of course, that will depend on the policy, because in many countries, the policy does not allow you to move your waste to another country. The waste cannot cross borders. So really here, policymakers need to come in. So again, South Africa, from the core to the wet pools, from the wet pools to dry storage casks. So spent fuel storage capacity expansion. This is a common feature of most national situations who are independent of the back-end option of the fuel cycle. So you can re-reg the pools like shown in this picture here. You can have additional storage on site. You can have a consolidated off-site storage, whether wet or dry. So South Africa at Eskom, they've already re-regged the pools 2 times. So at this point, re-regging the pools is not an option in South Africa. And then that is why now Eskom has opted for a transient interim storage facility, because they cannot go the re-regging of the pools any longer. So in South Africa now, there is a project called the Centralized Interim Storage Facility, which was called in by the Radioactive Waste Management Policy Strategy for the Republic of South Africa. This policy was developed in 2005 because they did realize that the long-term storage of spent fuel on site will be unsustainable in the long run. And of course, again, the above dry storage away from the reactor, it is still not good because you can store for 50 years, but you are causing undue burden to the future generation. So now this is the centralized interim storage facility project in South Africa. You can see that it can only be ready in 2030, but Eskom needs it around 2025. So already we are off schedule. It means that Eskom has to have an interim plan in order to be able to be storing their spent fuel while they are waiting for the centralized interim storage facility. So dry storage facilities are good because you can store your spent fuel for more than 50 years if you have a good monitoring plan, surveillance, and aging management planning. And over the past 20 to 30 years, the gap that is filled by a dry storage, competing with other backend services has increased, and its passive cooling capability, reduced fuel cladding correction, it makes it more attractive compared to wet storage because you don't have to deal with the chemistry of the pools. And of course, the reduced life cycle costs make it even more attractive because there's lower maintenance costs compared to a spent fuel pool. So this is like the plan for South Africa. We all know that now Quebec will run until 2045. So whatever plan that we have chosen, by 2065, a deep geological repository has to be reached. And of course, as Africa, we pride ourselves because we have very stable geology and the seismic activities are usually very low to nothing at all. So in conclusion, I would say that globally, we can see already that there's an increase in energy, health, agriculture, and many other things. There's an increase in demand on those things. And the Quebec lifetime extension implies that there will be more spent fuel. And there's a goal of moving away from coal-generated power in order to be kind to the environment. The above means that in future, the increase in the disposal of large volume waste in deep geological repository will increase. And of course, economically, I don't think there's any African country that can afford to establish a deep geological repository on its own. So what will be the answer for Africa? It's an African regional multinational high-level waste repository and answer. And of course, waste management projects are usually long-term. The engagement of the youth is always needed. If we're saying that by 2065, South Africa should be having a deep geological repository, as young as I might look, that is a project that I might not even see. And of course, the biggest challenge of any nuclear waste management related activity is to ensure societal and political acceptance. I think that should be enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bvumbi. I'm now going to, pardon me, I'm doing my bad experience. There we are. Okay. So thank you for that talk, and I'd look for some questions that's raising in many areas. I'm now going to ask Professor Antoine Maluba, who is the head of Mineral Processing and Technology Research Center at University of Johannesburg. He's a former head of School of Mining, Metallurgy and Chemical Engineering, and is a fellow of the Southern African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy. Professor Maluba is an NOF-rated scientist, as established researcher. He's also a professor of hydrometallurgy at the Department of Metallurgy. His research interests encompass natural resource beneficiation and value addition, the circular economy, strategic minerals, industry symbiosis, waste to energy, and nuclear waste engineering standards. And with that, I'll pass across to him and look for his presentation on the almost the ethics of nuclear waste.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for this nice introduction of the presenter. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, our presentation today will be on ethics considerations around nuclear waste. Nuclear industry has been facing many challenges. We are aware of the public issue, public image. We are aware of the high cost of equipment which are related to it. And there have been concerns about safety and concerns on proliferation fees. The main challenge here, or the main issue here, is that today, through the energy production, nuclear waste has been generated. So now, looking at ways to dispose it of. Now, there is also possibility to dispose it of for future generations to handle. So these are ethical issues around it. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has classified the nuclear waste, as we have heard, taking into consideration the qualitative as well as the quantitative criteria. So, which are, in this case include radioactivity level and heat content. Now, that classification brings in exempt waste, very short-lived waste, very low-level waste, intermediate level waste, and high-level waste. It has been seen that the handling methods of all of these the different wastes depends on the types of the radionuclide, whether it is a short-lived or a long-lived. And it depends also on the concentration of the radioactive material, the radionuclide, and also the ratio of the above. Yeah, nuclear waste is generated from different sources. We have, for example, waste from the fuel cycle. For example, as it comes from the power generations, or as it is from the military used. We have also waste from the spent fuel management, and we have also waste for the other applications or materials. And in addition to this fuel cycle related nuclear waste, we have also waste from non-nuclear industry. For example, from the medical applications, hospitals, and so on. And we have also waste from the research laboratories. Of course, we should not forget waste from accidents. This slide shares with us this cycle that nuclear waste or nuclear fuel actually goes through. It starts here from the mining itself, and then it goes to the conversion through hexafluoride of uranium, and then to the enrichment. Very often we use sanctification, and then to the fabrication of the nuclear fuel, which is used in nuclear reactors. And then from there, the spent fuel is then disposed of or reprocessed. This figure here at the bottom, it shows where nuclear fuel is used in a PWR reactor. This is the core of the reactor, and then in the core here, you have your nuclear fuel. Okay. Issues around nuclear waste include technical issues, societal issues, and policy-related issues, mainly around the storage and the disposal. Ethics principles, which are related to the moral values about human being actions, they also come with responsibilities. The main ones are autonomous, justice, non-maleficence, and beneficence. So we will go through them to see how, due to the development in the technology, the nuclear industry has addressed all of these four main ethics principles. Now, here the concern is it ethical to generate nuclear waste today and leave it for future generations to deal with? These are aspects to deal with. Yeah. Again and again, policymakers have to assist us in these concerns. Now, societal challenges around nuclear waste include the nuclear stigma. There is such mental stress to communities living around nuclear facility. They don't know when an accident may or will occur. So it has been advised that we bring such a community for professional counseling. Yeah, as there are nuclear activities in a given area, there is a possibility of irradiation and also heat developed. So now there is a possibility of disturbance of indigenous biodiversity. Here we are talking of the flora, the fauna, and then you'll see all the birds and related animals will then immigrate away. Yeah. During the consultation before erecting, for example, a nuclear facility, whether it is for disposal of the waste or for the generation of the energy, there could be some individuals accepting the erection of the facility, but many of them, they say, okay, we accept it to go ahead, but don't put the waste in my backyard. So that one also is a situation to deal with. Yeah, the principle of justice. It has been noticed that nuclear energy is, or nuclear rejuiscence is produced in a given area, but the waste generated, the waste produced is planned to be transported and stored in a different area. Such is the situation in Canada, for example, where energy is produced in the south and the plants are to store the waste in the north. So we need to look at the equitable distribution of the costs, of the risk, and also the sharing of the benefits. Yeah, there is what is called coercion, or seen as coercion or and consent. Government have money and power. Technology investors, they have the money to support the technology they're bringing in. Now, when there is an idea, example, to erect a power generation, they go through consultation, okay, but the community at a time perceives as if government is using or abusing its authority to force this facility. Then if such is the case, is it ethical for the establishment of such a facility in that community? Yeah. Around the consent, there is also a consent dilemma. For example, in the community, you will find a group of wary people that are knowledgeable in the field. They know what is going around. These are those who mainly will try to oppose to the project. But often it is noticed that those who are willing to accept the project very often are not as knowledgeable as the other ones. So now it might be perceived as if we would be using the vote of those who are not aware of the possible dangers of having that facility there. So ethics considerations include technical aspect, societal, and policy related. But a lot has been done to improve the technology related into the handling of the waste and even storing and disposing them. So this means that fears that the community might have should be dissipated. Okay, and the societal effort that we need to do here is to get the society to accept that dealing with nuclear energy, it is actually safe and it is a greener way to go, because there are attributes. And when, for example, a waste disposal facility comes into a given community, there is there is job creation opportunity. Yeah, so we need also to work with policy makers to help the society understand and comply with regulations which will be put in place. So, acting responsibly, we say yes. Is there justice? We say yes. Because there have been development, proven development on safe long-term disposal. For example, in geological structures. The next speaker will be alluding to the South African experience. Yeah. There have been also proven development into the processing of the waste before disposal. Of course, there have been development in appropriate technologies, which brings in the need for related education of the youth, because we are dealing with, for example, long-lived waste. So as a given generation is working with this waste today, they have also to bring in the youth so that they get trained, they get related skills, so that when the generation, the today's generation goes, the youth continue to ably and also responsibly deal with this waste. Ideas of regional and disposal facilities has been advanced, even also conventions. Yeah, there is a concept of adequacy, which is a utilitarianism theory of ethics. An act is good when it is useful and evil when it harms. So the way nuclear waste has been studied, handled, and also planned, it is for the good of the community. Yeah. A lot is in the research, development, and innovation in the radioactive waste engineering and science. This slide shows, for example, a development where biomass, agricultural biomass, has been used to extract uranium-6 from aqueous solutions. So dealing with, as you change the pH, as you vary the pH of the medium or of the system, you do have different types of uraniums in a solution. Now, using an activated biomass, thermodynamical studies have been done. So the prediction, it is seen here, the prediction actually are in line with observed experimental data. So in conclusion, we say that autonomous principle of ethics, yes, has been applied, as future generations is needed to be educated, to be skilled, and so that they take responsibility. Justice, yes, if there is equitable distribution of advantages, of resource, of risks, and also of benefit, including sharing of responsibility. Non-maleficent, yes, it is not intended to harm anybody. Beneficence, it is yes, because here we are aiming at using a source of energy which is clean and that we can control. Thank you very much.
Oh, what a terrible.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Maluba. I'm now going to get back to her. Apologize for my. So that was a discussion, an excellent discussion on the ethics of waste disposal. Just a moment. Visible. Yeah. And I'm now going to ask Dr. Marco Andreoli, who is a private professional geological consultant and a research associate at the School of Geoscience at the University of Witwatersrand. He has more than 30 years experience acquired working at NECSA. His experience covers nuclear energy related site selection investigations, the characterization of uranium, thorium deposits in granite terrains, and issues of seismic and structural stability in South Africa. He also collaborates widely with many academics to study the biggest African impact and airburst events by extraterrestrial objects. One, the Apatia stone, hosting unique complex metallic and organic structures. So with that, I'll pass it across to Dr. Andreoli and see if I can make that work. There we are. Yeah. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to present something rehashed from the days when I was at NECSA, and some of the things you already seen, some other things probably you haven't seen. And I've been involved on the cycle of uranium from its cradle in the hard rocks to the disposal, and over a period of almost 40 years. So I have some insight in this aspect. I've also been involved in the siting of potential nuclear power station around the coastal regions. And what comes out is that, first of all, the take-home message is there is no ideal geological site for either nuclear power station or for disposal. Maybe it's on the moon or in another planet. But on Earth, essentially, the take-home message is that you have to characterize any site, the flows and strength, and realize which are in the balance. The more information one gathers, the better it is for the engineers to take remedial action. And in South Africa, we are lucky because we have lots of suitable environments. And that is what we have been working by working and spending a lot of time, many decades around fault. So I think I can press this one to go on. Okay, so you already been exposed to the issue of the South African Radioactive Agency from our colleague and who met some years ago. And we have two types of disposal, one in drums of cement, concrete, special, designed to last for as long as possible. The other one is very, very low waste, cloths and fabrics used in laboratory, filters, papers, that is disposed in metal containers and which are not supposed to last for a very long time, the container itself, given the rusting capacity, but it's a very, very, very low level. So is the one that perhaps doesn't bring major issues. Oops, let me see myself. But the cement drums have been tested, they've been rockets fired at them, they've been shaken and dropped of great height, and so, and then many years later, after they left some of these drums left on site and the open air, we brought a specialist in cement and who did some acid testing and some observation, and he realized that the cement had barely started deteriorating. So given the say that, we can move now to the next slide. We, over the many years, over a period of decades, we have looked at the geological environment of falpoots. You have seen the falpoots from the air from our colleague, and the site is, oops, no, sorry. The falpoot trenches are indicated there. They are in an environment that it's been very stable for many millions of, tens of millions of years. We can see how the erosions over the last 20, 30 million years have been trying to get to the disposal site, but essentially has been arrested during the tertiary, let's say more than 10 million years ago, those drainages. So, and on the left-hand side of, sorry, we want to try to move with the finger. We have even sediments that have been there for 70 million years. We have little volcanoes that are the air of the dinosaurs that have been merely eroded. So we know that geologically speaking, this area is extremely flat and stable from that point of view. We have also looked then at a number of other aspects of climate. Is climate present and projected in the future going to be as it is now? So we have interrogated the soils. This one. Okay. We have interrogated the soil of the trenches to tell us how climate has changes on the period of time that radioactive waste is supposed to be, even in the worst possible scenario, that there is no reprocessing, that that we are looking at a span of a million years. And so the sediments we have interrogated with the help of soil scientists. Over the number of years, we have this research consortia where we have looked at geomorphology with geomorphologists. Then we have looked at the paleosoils with soil scientists, and we published at all time. We continue to publish papers in referee journals so that everything is recorded. Every step of the way has always been backed by very skillful specialists, because essentially I'm a generalist. I'm a GP of earth science. But when there are complexities, then we brought in at NICSA, we brought in experts in the particular field. So we were able to take apart the stratigraphic level of the clays and the soils, and they tell us of changing environment. And overall, it seems that there was a continued dry condition for, let's say, for a few million years. During the time span that radioactive waste has been stable or can be radioactive, even, as I say, in the most case where million-year time span is to be looked. However, there have been some events that were identified, which were very strangely very different from the present day. And so this structure in paleosols show that there has been these extreme events, and we want to understand what happened during these extreme events. So this is matter of future investigations. It is something that the plan was to address them as
Marco?
Yes.
Just a question. We can't see you, Mr. Nicholls here. We can't see your slides. I'm going to take control back from you and then give it back to you, so you can hopefully, when you come back, align it to the screen better. I apologize for this, but there's been a technical issue. So I'm going to take control back, and then I'll give control immediately back to yourself.
I don't know how.
Okay, I'll take control back. I'm now giving it back to yourself. There you are. I'm going to change it to there. You should be able to say. Success.
Yeah, but I go back a moment just in case and another one further. Sorry. Okay, so we had this research consortia over a period of decades. We interacted with specialists to address every possible aspect of what could be going wrong in a repository. The first consortium or group of scientists was to address the possibility that erosion comes and denudes the repository. And essentially that shows that the chances that it's impossible. The erosion rate from the west of the stream draining to the Atlantic Ocean or to the east or west is exceedingly small. So we have rocks that are been there for tens of millions of years near surface. The other consortium is it addresses the issues of the stratigraphy of the trenches to understand paleoclimates. And again, most of the time, the climate has been not too different from, for the period of years we are concerned, 1 million years, hasn't changed. But we also identified one exotic period that we need to clarify, which was very active. It produces corrosions of sediments, it produces deformation, and like we see veins of barite have been sliced. So this is an episode we would like to understand more, and therefore it's unlikely that this affects the low-level waste, because the low-level waste will be no longer waste radioactive, will be just waste in 3 years' time, 300 years' time. So it's academia for the waste that is disposed now, but if we want to go for the high-level waste, then obviously it's something that future scientists will have to address. Because it's it was a period of activity and let's say least desirable, but it is not for the waste of today. It's for future high-level waste if one wants to clarify. So we also look at the baseline of natural radioactivity in the groundwater. NEXA has been very proactive. We have at Falpots the best recording in Africa and one few places in the world where people have analyzed a certain area, the groundwater, for natural radioactivity 4 times a year over a period of 20, 30 years. So we wrote a paper which is published now and in the South African Journal of Geology, where we describe this baseline of what happens to uranium in the granite, how it interacts with the groundwater, and at the time when no uranium waste was sent from Coburg. So we know that is a very good baseline, because now some uranium-bearing waste is being disposed or stored in at Falpots. So if there was, let's say, a leak or people wanted to see what the radioactivity behaves, we may find a spike. So they say, is it natural coming from the ground, the natural groundwater, or it is from waste? Well, this diagram shows that around 2000, there was a natural event that dislodged uranium-234 from the natural site of minerals like zircon or monazite that are been there for 1 billion years. They pulled them out and put it in the groundwater. But a few years later, it's somehow the chemistry changed. That particular environmental condition that allowed that breakthrough, it's disappeared. So the water has become again a very low radioactivity. But we want to know this kind of things, because if it happens again in future, we can say, look, this kind of uranium-234 that goes out of the rock into the groundwater is a natural phenomenon. So it shows that things are active. The environment, even the flattest possible environment, is an active environment. Now the consortium of researchers we have been active. We still published a month ago a paper, not in particular in Falpots, but in Springbok, where we look at radioactivity and the distribution of radioactive rocks in the granitic basement. Because the Namaqualand, obviously beautiful granite, magnificent, the blocks of granite that are mined, quarried and exported everywhere in the world because they are such beautiful granite. So we have drilled boreholes, several boreholes, a couple to 1 kilometer depth, and one borehole identified just a nice block of granite like you couldn't find anywhere in the world. But there are other parts where the granite has some interesting mineralization, for instance, of radioactive minerals. In the other places, the granite is unusually radioactive. So one want to try to understand where this granites with uranium or this mineralization or radioactive occur, so that you don't want people to go to mine those rocks in future. So we, with this group of people, we have been looking at this aspect. And for instance, there is this Steenkamskral monazite thorium mine. It was mined in the 50s for thorium, where at the time when many countries, including India, were using a lot of thorium soaked gas lamps for illumination. So this was, he is still the richest thorium and uranium bearing deposit in the world. And when we brought a professor from Russia, and from the Boris Burakov, he did his PhD by doing the mineralogy of the lava produced at Chernobyl. It was the shortest field trip ever done for a PhD. He spent probably a few minutes running in and out, collecting samples from the lava molten rock inside the reactor, and then he did his PhD and he discovered a new type of zircon, uranium zircon, and he was absolutely delighted and found this was an amazing place to study what could happen if radioactive waste is left open. This place, when I visited for the first time the Steenkamskral in the early 80s, at the time when we were at the Shoreland Center, and it was completely abandoned. There were these pools of green water, where we discovered was the most radioactive water in the world, and was farmed. People sent the sheep to graze in these places in the early 80s. Nobody bothered any longer. It was abandoned radioactive site. Since then, it's all changed. It's all fenced with all radioactive signs, and there is a company that is planning to mine, if possible, thorium or planning for earth. But we did this investigation in this consortium of scientists from the UK. We published again here, but we were planning to continue to look how colloids could transport away from this ore, this vein that has been mined there in that gap that you see on the left-hand side. And so this was another research project that very interesting because it shows a convalidation, or where a place you could convalidate what could happen in future to radioactive waste. We also looked at the seismic hazard, because Falkland itself is an island of stability, but in the middle of a very broad area of Namaqualand where seismicity is taking place. We had the instrument recording, we processed again with colleagues at WITS. We did some PhD project, misses, and there was a nice swarm that we investigated around Ograbis Falls. Every now and then we have farmers listening to vibration, ground vibration in the general area. So we spent a lot of time. I'm still involved in this issue of neotectonic, which is an issue interesting because the seismic activity taking place in the Namaqualand and throughout the Northern Cape and the Western Cape is not related to plate tectonic. Is another kind of phenomenon, tectonic activity that is not is a paradigm shift from the tectonic that we know in other parts of the world. So we are focusing at WITS on these areas of interesting activity. It is not an issue, again, for falpets, but if, again, we want to look at the long-term aspect of radioactive work, it's certainly worth understanding why we have seismicity that from a tectonic engine that is non-plate tectonic. So this diagram, the bottom right, shows that seismic activity in the Namaqualand has been increasing from the early days over the strain rate is changing all the time. So it's something that we are working on at WITS. And this is now changed completely. We go to another part of the world. We see what the Swedes are done in Oscar Ransom, where they developed what we would have liked to see at Falpets, an underground laboratory where basically we went down with a bus of 500 meters into granite, where they're running all sorts of experiments. This beautiful bus is luxury, and we visited with a colleague from one of the other departments at NEXA. Over a period of 2 years, we had this wonderful opportunity to visit the site of research sites in Finland and the research site in Sweden. There's a few photos from this laboratory at Ashpo, the underground hard rock laboratory. By bus, we went to this tremendously big cavern where for visitors, and we're able to see all the experiments that we would like to, or somebody should perhaps do at Falpets in future, or another site selected where they are running experiments, and they are all explained very well because it's obviously for visitors, for scientists from all over the world, and we can. Okay, so with all sorts of boards, everything is explained very neatly and clearly. The idea is to have tunnels, and from tunnels, vertical shaft. You can see them on the left. This vertical shaft are about 2 meters wide and 6, 8 meters deep, where canisters, you will see them later, are then placed inside, and then they will try to see all sorts of things. It's not an ideal site. It's under the sea. Water comes down from either from the sea or from the side or from. So you can imagine a worst possible place for relatively compared to a place like in Northern Cape in South Africa. But they were able to quantify and find that the possibility are completely minimized of escape of radioactive waste. Here we see one of these shafts drilled inside a tunnel where you can see the granites with the bending and the water's leaking. So in this case, they will put a canister in here we see a fracture from which the deep water leaks and deposits iron oxides, and in this case, so the canister will be surrounded by a sleeve of bentonite, a clay that absorbs and seals every possible fractures. But then they wanted to see if perhaps water leaks comes into contact with radioactive waste, hydrogen is produced and it can corrode. So they did this laboratory testing, drilling away from a canister, test canister, and injection. And so here you see, in this particular case, a beautiful a canister of copper with a lid, surrounded by a white bentonite donut inside this this vertical shaft. Here you see again the canister of copper with some special iron frame inside, where the units with plutonium-bearing waste, let's say, are all disposed and then surrounded by the granite. And this is the center. Okay, so this is it. Again.
Thank you very much, Professor. Doctor. Sorry, I'm getting carried away.
It would have been nice to be professor, but I've always been too busy doing work in the field rather than teach. So.
Okay. Well, thank you to all our presenters. I'm going to suggest that we've got a few minutes and we go through the questions that have been coming up. And I'll ask the questions of the relevant presenters. The first question, somebody's asked the question, I think several asked the question of when do we get the slides, and the slides will be, I believe, made available on the SAIEE website shortly. So that's the first thing that's important. The second question, which I'm going to ask to, there's actually a couple of questions to Suzan, Dr. Suzan. How deep is high-level waste buried and for how long? So I'll ask the question of Dr. Bvumbi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, high-level waste can be buried for deeper than 50 meters, and you can bury it for few hundreds of years to even thousands, depending on the half-life of the radionuclides that are contained. So with high-level waste, it goes beyond thousands of years.
Okay, the questions actually are all, I think, all for you, Dr. Bvumbi. The second one is, why is high-level waste not always reprocessed to very short-lived waste?
No, that depends on the strategy that a particular.
I'll try and answer that one because I'll put on my old ESCOM hat and say the answer to that question is money. Essentially, if you reprocess your waste, it is substantially more expensive than direct disposal. And so the countries that went for reprocessing, and it's worth bearing in mind that back in the 1970s, reprocessing was seen as the absolute future because we needed to have, we're going to run out of uranium, we needed to have fast breeder reactors. That's, I think, fallen away. There's no shortage of uranium. So the answer is, why don't we reprocess high-level waste? The answer is money. And essentially, the benefit is limited because the final disposal, deep final disposal, is not seen as it's a technical challenge, but it's not seen as it's now been approved in Finland. They're building their final repository, and so it's seen as a solution. The next questions, I'm going to pass, please see the slides, is specifically to yourself, Dr. Bvumbi. What makes near-surface disposal safe for South Africa from environmental contamination? And the last one is the same as the previous one, which what is the obstacles to a recycling option in South Africa? So First question is, why is a near surface repository okay for South Africa?
For the low-level waste that is produced at Safari Research Reactor and also Ubek, the radionuclides contained in those type of waste, they are very short-lived and they do not produce heat. So we're talking about things like overalls, gloves, papers, and they are usually stored in metal containers. And the radioactive waste that is a bit long-lived is usually just a few hundreds of years. So a shallow disposal is quite safe, and there's no way that it can have any undue damage to the environment or any leakages. As Dr. Marco has alluded, Falco's disposal facility has been proven to be very safe and secured.
In the car. Okay,
What was the other question?
The other question is, what are the obstacles to impede a nuclear fuel cycle recycling in South Africa?
It will go back to money, as you have said. South Africa really cannot afford to go the reprocessing route at the moment. At the moment, we really can't afford that.
I can add another one to that, if I may.
Yes.
Politics, because if we were to establish a reprocessing facility to allow us to reprocess, politically that would be a very, very, very challenging activity. So I think essentially we are safe in the view that reprocessing in South Africa is very difficult. Reprocessing, if we're going to reprocess anything now, it would have to be sent to a country that has a reprocessing facility, which presently operationally is under the Russians and the French. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm looking for.
Won't it even go to policymakers, because at present our policy does not speak to reprocessing, isn't it?
No. It doesn't. It allows it, but it not being done. And I'm going to assess it that money is the driver there. It's an issue. And okay. Any more questions? I've gone through the questions except for one. Any other questions from the? I can see no more questions. I may be unqualified to operate the system is the next question, but I think I'm okay. Okay, with that, I'm going to suggest that we close the webinar. Thank you for attending the technical talk today. And please visit the SAIE website on www.saiee.org.za for upcoming webinars. And with that, thank you very much indeed. And I will close. Thank you to the presenters. I think it was fascinating. I'm fascinated by. And I'm going to therefore close the webinar and look forward to the next one, which I think is on Wednesday, but I'll ask that if you check the website. Thank you, people.
Cheers.
Have a good day.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.